a bunch of our clients have been saying for years, if you go to one conference, you should go to the Landmark CIO conference, and it's taken us about 8 years to get here, 5 years at least. So we're super psyched to be here. Thank you. We get asked, I've met, I don't know, 10, 15 folks here today, and everyone kind of looks at me a little to the side, says, what exactly does WillowTree do? So before I get started, to settle the context, I thought I would talk about that for just 30 seconds. So we're an agency. We're a digital agency focused on mobile. There are a lot of agencies out there. We work with a lot of you in the room. We've got a very specific strategy of being located. All our folks are co-located in college towns on the East Coast, which allows us to do two things. One is we have tight relationships with the computer science departments, with the design departments, with the psychology departments at leading universities to allow us to kind of be best in class. The second thing is we hire a bunch of kids out of those schools, and they stay in those towns, places like Charlottesville, Virginia, Durham, North Carolina, that are great places to live, and we can operate at a lower cost than similar agencies in the New York or the Bay Areas. What I'm here to talk to you about today is the future of user experience. As Anthony was saying, this is kind of where it all comes together. We believe right now we are on the cusp of probably the biggest jump in, or the biggest change in user experience since the iPhone came on the market. There's been a lot in the press. Is mobile innovation dead? Is it over? We think we're about to hit a major uptrend. And if you kind of take it to its very core, what's going on here and why is that? At the end of the day, we as humans type at about 40 words a minute, and that's the primary mechanism with which we interface with machines today. We can speak at about 3 times that rate. These are all in English, obviously, and we read at about twice that rate. So in our quest for speed and efficiency, which is at the root of everything, we're going to a world where we feel we're going to be speaking primarily, there are contexts where we won't be speaking, but speaking to machines and then reading the response, right? And that is the written word. There's an argument that if you can primarily communicate with images, like our ancestors did, you can actually communicate at multiples of 250 words a minute in terms of transmitting ideas. For those of you who were at Facebook's F8 conference or who saw the highlights, this was one of the most interesting things they did. They have now a cognitive science group of over 100 folks. And Facebook's point is speech is cool, reading is cool, but they're all still limited, rate limited in a certain way, whereas our brains work at hundreds, or could work at hundreds of times how fast we can speak. We could actually formulate and transmit thoughts much more quickly. We're limited by our vocal cords, et cetera, et cetera. So they're working on what if we can communicate directly with machines? And this woman here has ALS. She is trapped inside her body, and they have gotten through direct contact with the brain her to be able to transmit information at 8 words a minute, which is obviously a huge breakthrough. There's a big problem with that for the rest of us, is that it's done by inserting electrodes in the brain. So it's not going to happen for all of us tomorrow, but they believe over the next 10, 20 years, there are going to be mechanisms for us to communicate at that speed. That's kind of where we're all going. But in the near term, 2017, 2018, we believe this gets us to a multimodal world, right? And that is a world, Forrester sometimes calls it a blended ecosystem, but it is a world where we can communicate to one device via one interface and receive information back via another, right? And it's complicated to execute on, right? We have multiple digital ecosystems we live in, Amazon, Apple, Facebook. They all have a lot of our data. They're not sharing that data anytime soon. So as end users, how do we navigate that? And this can be both in an enterprise setting or for employees or in a consumer setting. And we're in all sorts of contexts, right? We've got lots of devices, operating systems, interfaces. How do we make it work together? And what am I really talking about? I think the easiest for me is to show this by example. What we're about to show you here is something we're working on for Regal Cinemas. Anthony actually earlier mentioned buying movie tickets. It's a very kind of standard use case. What we're talking about and how this works in reality is you wake up in the morning, you walk downstairs, you ask your Echo, Alexa, what's showing tonight, right? And the reason you do that is because that is the fastest way to engage. It's way faster than turning on your phone, finding the app, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't want to listen to Alexa tell you, here are the 20 movies, here are the different show times. That's why voice hasn't really taken off yet, because all these are voice in, voice out experiences, and the voice return kind of sucks, right? But and this is working right now. You're going to get a notification, one tap. You're going to see what movies are playing. You could say, give me more info on born identity, born one, whatever. Then that comes back via another text, more information. And then you can tap to select a ticket, or you could order the ticket, get me 2 tickets tonight. And now you've taken a transaction that's already pretty quick, right? You know, a long time ago, you had to go to the theater. 10 years, 15 years ago, you got to go on your computer. Now, you're using an app, but it still takes 3 or 4 minutes. We think we can get it down to less than a minute to find the movie you want to go to and buy tickets. That may not seem like a big deal. I can guarantee you it's a huge deal to consumers. That is where they will gravitate. And this example is a consumer example, but the exact same thing is happening in the enterprise. We're working with clients every day where they're taking processes that used to take 10, 15, 20 minutes in the field, looking at user manuals, trying to find they'd have, here's our manual, here's the parts list from the manufacturer, but our warehouse uses a different number, and you got to match it up, and then you got to type it in a laptop, 17 minutes to order a part. Now we're getting down to 15 seconds. Can you order me because we know what machine they're at. We have all kinds of context, right? And so to make this work, and I think this has been a big theme today, we have to change the questions we're asking, right? Before we were always, the briefs we would get was, I need an app that does X, right? How much does that cost? A better question is, how might we better do X? How might we better allow our technicians in the field to order a part? How might we better get a consumer to buy X from us? This is an approach that was originally pioneered by IDEO 10 or 12 years ago across all kind of product design. We're really using it very focused on digital design right now. And so another really popular example, if you go to a lot of these conferences, you'll hear it again and again. I don't know if there's anyone from Domino's in the room. But Domino's has done this very well. And pizza's a very easy use case, right? It's not that hard to figure out. I got to order pizza. I got to put a couple toppings on it. I got to get it. Not that hard. And so Domino's has an advantage in that sense over many of our businesses, which are much more complicated. But they kind of completely changed the way that they viewed themselves. And this is, to me, the most interesting part, is that of their folks at headquarters, they say half are in software and analytics. And that is a fundamental change from where they were 10 years ago. The output is you can order pizza anywhere. You can even order pizza on Slack, which is finally a productive use of Slack, at least how it's used in my company. And they all work together in concert, right? This is today. The Regal example is today. You could okay, Google, place the order, and you can watch that order be prepared across any device, Android Wear, a native app, a website, and it all works in concert, right? And that seems like it's really easy to do. It's really hard to do. And the primary investment they had to make, and I guarantee most of those 400 folks are working on the back end, right? The front end stuff is actually pretty easy. And the results, we all talk about Amazon, Google, and kind of that. Domino's has outpaced that stock, all those, over the last 6, 7 years. They've gone from 9 to 15% market share. So there have been all kinds of folks who have come to presentations like this and announced the next big thing. It's Segway, 3D TV, AR, VR to some extent that the jury's still out on, at least on mass adoption. We think multimodal is different because it's software and not hardware. The hardware is in everyone's hands today. Now we just have to update the software to make it work in this way. And so what do we see happening over the next year or two? And where can people kind of spend their time? One is focus on infrastructure, right? The infrastructure has to be set up to make all this work first. The front-end folks like us have a really easy job when we can get at the data. We talked about data lakes, et cetera. When that's ready to go, we can start playing. Start with the current platforms. Like, there's no need to go into all kinds of new stuff. You can test a bunch of this stuff just using the iPhone and having voice in and visual response, and then you go to other platforms, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, keep it lean. That example that I just showed you from Regal, that took 3 people about 6 weeks to do, right? So these are light, lean prototyping things. We test them, and then they go out to the market. So I'd encourage you to kind of look at that within your own organization. Thank you.